Everyone laughed when the Chinese billionaire mocked the black waiter until he replied in Chinese. The ballroom shimmered with excess. Crystal chandeliers dripped golden light across polished marble floors, and laughter bounced off the gilded walls like music. It was the annual International Business Gala in Manhattan, where the world's wealthiest gathered to flaunt power and trade secrets over champagne. But while the suits sparkled and the dresses flowed like rivers of silk, not everyone in that room belonged. At the far edge of the hall, weaving between clusters of billionaires and politicians, was Marcus Johnson, 27 years old. He wasn't dressed in Armani or tailored silk. Instead, he wore the crisp black vest and white shirt of a waiter, a tray of champagne glasses balanced expertly in his steady hand. He kept his head down, his posture professional, and his voice quiet. That's what he'd been taught. Invisible but indispensable. But Marcus was not invisible tonight. The laughter started near the head table. A tall man with slick black hair and a suit that looked like it cost more than most people's houses leaned back in his chair, swirling a glass of vintage wine. His name was Liang Wei, a Chinese billionaire whose empire stretched from shipping to tech to hotel. At only 52, his influence was so vast that entire stock markets trembled when he sneezed, and he had noticed Marcus. As Marcus leaned forward to serve wine at his table, Liang tilted his head, lips curling into a smirk. "Look," he said loudly in Mandarin, his words sharp and mocking. "They let anyone serve us these days, even someone who probably doesn't know the difference between Bordeaux and cheap soda." The men and women around him chuckled, following his lead. Most of the room didn't understand the words, but the tone was unmistakable. Mockery. Liang Wei enjoyed audiences, and he had just found one. Marcus froze for a split second. He had understood every word. For years, Marcus had kept a secret, working long hours, saving every dollar. He had never told anyone at the catering company that he had a gift: languages. He had spent his nights not at bars or clubs, but bent over secondhand textbooks, online lectures, and audio recording. He spoke fluent French, conversational Arabic, and Mandarin Chinese, though no one here knew it. Now, standing in the center of the world's most powerful room, the secret boiled in his chest. The laughter grew louder as Leon continued, pointing a jeweled finger at Marcus. "Tell me, boy," he said now in accented English, his tone dripping with disdain, "do you even know where this wine comes from? Or do you just carry glasses and hope not to drop them?" The room erupted again, laughter bouncing across the hall like cruel echoes. Even some who didn't understand the joke joined in, because mocking a waiter was safe entertainment. Marcus placed a last glass on the table with steady hand. But inside, his pulse thundered. His eyes, dark, sharp, unblinking, locked on the billionaire. And then, calmly, he spoke, the reply in Chinese. Marcus's voice cut through the laughter. Smooth, clear, confident. "This bottle comes from Bordeaux, France. Vintage 1982. The words rolled out in perfect Mandarin, crisp tones and flawless pronunciation echoing across the stunned table. The laughter stopped instantly. Glasses paused midair. Forks hovered over plate. Even the music from the quartet in the corner seemed to fade. Liang's smirk faltered. His eyes widened for a split second before narrowing, sharp as a blade. And Marcus wasn't finished. Still in Mandarin, he added with measured calm, "But sir, if you truly knew wine, you'd know it should not be served this warm. The real insult to it isn't my hands carrying the tray. It's your lack of respect for its flavor." Gasps rippled through the table. Some covered their mouths. Others exchanged looks of shock. The billionaire waiter had just corrected the Chinese billionaire in his own language. Liang Wei leaned back slowly, studying Marcus as though seeing him for the first time. The mockery in his expression was gone, replaced by something else. A mixture of calculation, irritation, and grudging respect. Around the table, whispers began in English. Did he just... in Mandarin? That accent was flawless. The guard standing near the wall shifted uncomfortably. The power in the room had tilted, subtle but undeniable. Liang set down his wine glass, folding his hands together. "Interesting," he murmured in Mandarin, his voice lower now, the performance gone. "A waiter who knows more than he should. Tell me, boy, who are you really?" Marcus stood straighter, his jaw set, but his eyes calm. "Just someone who refuses to be laughed at," he said quietly, switching back to English. The room held its breath, and for the first time that evening, the billionaire had no comeback. The ballroom had never been this quiet. The air, once thick with laughter and clinking glasses, now vibrated with something else. Tension. Liang Wei's eyes never left Marcus. The billionaire's smirk had vanished, replaced with sharp, unreadable stare. The kind of stare a predator gave when its prey did something unexpected. Marcus stood tall, tray in hand, refusing to break eye contact. He wasn't just a waiter anymore. In that moment, he was the man who had turned the mockery back on the king of the room. Guests whispered in hushed tone, stealing glances between the two men. And though no one dared to say it aloud, everyone felt the same thing. The power in this room had shifted. Liang Wei finally leaned forward, his voice low but commanding, switching back to English so the room could follow. "You speak well," he said, eyes narrowing, "but words are cheap. Do you think a tongue makes you equal to me?" Marcus's jaw tightened, but he didn't answer. Liang snapped his finger. One of his assistants, a young Chinese man in a sleek blue suit, rushed forward. Liang whispered something in Mandarin. The assistant disappeared through the crowd. Seconds later, he returned carrying a Go board, the ancient Chinese strategy game, black and white stones resting inside polished wooden bowls. Gasps rippled through the audience. This wasn't just a game. For Liang Wei, who was known for humiliating rivals through it, this was a declaration, a duel of intellect. He set the board on the table and gestured for Marcus to sit. "If you're so clever," Liang said coldly, "show us. Beat me, and perhaps you deserve the respect you seek. Lose, and you leave this hall in shame." The crowd leaned in, every pair of eyes locked on Marcus. Marcus felt the weight of hundreds of stares pressing down on him. His fingers twitched against the tray he held. He wasn't supposed to be here, wasn't supposed to be seen, and certainly not supposed to sit across from a billionaire. But something inside him refused to step back. For years he had been invisible. For years he had been the boy no one noticed, the waiter, the servant, the background. Tonight, Liang Wei had dragged him into the light, and Marcus wasn't going to shrink from it. Slowly, he set the tray down, straightened his vest, and sat across from the billionaire. The room exhaled. The game had begun. The first stone clicked onto the board. Liang Wei's movements were smooth, confident. He played as though he were sculpting destiny itself. Marcus, however, paused before each move, his brow furrowed in thought. He wasn't a master of Go, but he had studied it. Late nights in the library, on cracked second-hand books and free online tutorials, he had absorbed its lessons: patience, balance, the art of sacrifice. Click, click, click. The board filled slowly, the black and white stones spreading like rivers across the grid. At first, Liang's moves dominated. He claimed territory with ease, smirking each time Marcus responded. The guest chuckled nervously, whispering about how bold the young man was to even try. But then Marcus began to weave. A subtle placement here, quiet move there. Patterns emerged. Small sacrifices that looked like mistakes began forming a shape, a hidden design only he seemed to see. The whispers grew louder. Some leaned forward, squinting at the board. The balance was shifting. And for the second time that night, Liang Wei's smirk began to fade. Halfway through the game, Liang Wei slammed a stone down harder than necessary. "You think you're clever," he hissed in Mandarin, his voice low enough for only Marcus to hear. "But you don't belong here. This world doesn't welcome men like you." Marcus met his gaze calmly. In Mandarin, he replied, "This board doesn't care about wealth, only wisdom. Maybe the world should learn from it." Liang's nostrils flared. His next move was rushed. Marcus seized the opening. With a steady hand, he placed a black stone in the corner, and suddenly, a chain reaction unfolded. Territories that seemed safe for Liang collapsed, his white stones trapped and surrounded. Gasps erupted around the room. People stood from their seats, craning their necks to see. The billionaire had just been cornered, and Marcus was winning. Liang stared at the board, his jaw tight. His fingers hovered above the bowl of stones, but didn't move. For the first time that night, sweat glistened on his forehead. Marcus leaned back, his expression calm but unyielding. "Sometimes," he said softly in Mandarin, "the quiet pieces change the game, not the loud one." The audience held its breath. Finally, with a clenched jaw, Liang Wei pushed the bowl of stones away. Enough! The word echoed like thunder. It was a surrender. The billionaire had lost. To the waiter he mocked. At first, silent. No one dared to move. Then a single clap broke through, followed by another and another. Within seconds, the hall roared with applause. Guests rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, some even whistling. The guards in the back exchanged astonished looks, one of them shaking his head in disbelief before joining the applause. Marcus sat still, his chest rising and falling, his eyes steady. Across the table, Liang Wei's face was stone, humiliated, but deep in his gaze, beneath the fury, there was something else. Reluctant respect. He stood, straightened his suit, and muttered, "You have earned tonight. But remember, boy, respect is fragile." Then he turned and walked away, his entourage scrambling to follow. The billionaire had left, but Marcus had stayed, and for the first time in his life, he wasn't invisible. As the applause finally quieted, Marcus rose from his chair. He felt dozens of hands patting his shoulder, heard voices calling out, "Incredible! You humiliated him. Who are you, really?" But Marcus just smiled faintly and shook his head. "I'm just a man who won't be laughed at." In the corner of the room, his supervisor, the catering manager who had always told him to keep his head down, stood frozen, mouth open in shock. For once, Marcus didn't care about breaking the rule. He picked up his tray again, but this time he wasn't serving in silence. This time, everywhere he walked, people's eyes followed him with admiration. That night, the story spread far beyond the walls of the gala. Guests repeated it at their own parties. Journalists whispered it into columns. And by the next morning, Marcus Johnson was no longer just a waiter. He was a man who had stood up to a billionaire and won. Opportunities followed, invitations, interviews. But Marcus didn't chase fame. What mattered most to him was what he had proved. Not just a Liang Wei, not just a crowd, but to himself. That dignity couldn't be bought. That intelligence didn't wear a price tag. That no one, billionaire or not, had the right to mock another person into silence. Months later, Marcus received a letter in crisp, formal Chinese handwriting. It was from Liang Wei. Only 7 words were written inside. Even the smallest stone changes a river. Marcus smiled as he folded the letter, because he already knew, and he always would. Like, share, comment, and subscribe for awesome and more engaging videos.